Hey guys, welcome back to On Our Terms, hosted by moi, Ismatou Bah, the big sis that fucks up so you don't have to. As usual, let's set some ground rules because this is not a safe space. It's a brave space, so let's be brave. In honor of that, mummy, I'm sick of being perfect. Featuring Eni Popoola. Eni, affectionately known online as Any Given Sunday, is a beauty and lifestyle content creator based in her hometown of New York City. After graduating from Harvard, Eni moved back to New York to teach middle school history. Soon after, she started her blog, Any Given Sunday, which quickly grew into a bustling online community after she began sharing Sunday church service outfits on Instagram. While at Columbia Law, Eni expanded her content into beauty, posting beginner-friendly tutorials and tips while sharing the journey to obtaining her JD. After graduating from law school with honors and passing the New York bar, she continues to cultivate a robust career as a content creator and entrepreneur. Period. It is so nice having you here today. How are you?
So great to be here. I'm doing well. I'm excited. I'm excited to chat, to sit down and just talk.
Today we're going to talk beauty and brains. You know, the infamous phase that like everybody loves.
Yeah.
You were like the perfect person to talk about beauty and brains with, because obviously given your bio, like you just are stacked in terms of the brains department. And
Thank you.
Look at you.
Thank you.
People don't know this, but you're also a prep alum.
Yeah.
You were on the brochures for like prep for like a little bit.
I had no idea.
You were on it.
That is so
You were
funny.
kind of one of the first faces that I saw when I like was applying to prep in a
That is
weird way.
so
And so when I
funny.
actually met you, I was like, oh my God, like that's the girl from the brochures.
Oh my gosh. In the flesh.
I don't know if you
That's
know
so
that.
crazy. Maybe it could have been, was I like a teenager? Like, did I look older?
No, you look like you were in high school. It was giving like high school Eni. Like,
That could have been at the Lilac Ball. I spoke my senior year at the Lilac Ball, but I'm not sure. That could have been it.
yeah. So it's like kind of interesting for me from like 10 years ago, from like one of the first materials that I got from this program, who's actually, and prep is obviously pretty integral to who I am and where I am. And now seeing you online as like kind of a role model to a lot of young women, you have always, I guess subconsciously, always kind of symbolized this beauty and brains. Because I remember seeing you and be like, oh my God, like that could be me one day.
Yeah, wow.
Very aspirational. And to kind of see you come into influencer, I really felt strongly, like I feel like you kind of are like a big sister to many on the platform. And as an oldest daughter who doesn't have any older sisters at all, I'm always, I feel like, clawing for some sort of like representation or I don't know, just kind of that feeling or that like kind of yearning for that sort of relationship.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so sweet. I feel like I always operate in a sort of bubble when I'm doing what I'm doing online. And so it's just so great to hear that and to see how people either come to know me or just like what their exposure to my content and just like my life story has been, because I'm so just, I feel like I always have blinders on. And so that was really nice to hear. Thank you.
So I want to start by giving a little context. When I started On Our Terms, it was kind of an opportunity to kind of bring together a lot of these disparate identities that I have that I couldn't really like consolidate. Like obviously going through prep, going to boarding school, these are all like kind of unique. There's not a lot of Black girls who come from New York, daughter of immigrant parents. Like there's not, like I felt like a lot of representation for us. And then also being Muslim, West African, I felt like there wasn't a lot of spaces for a lot of this. I feel like, especially navigating white spaces, I've honestly mostly led with like my intelligence and being professional and being the gifted and talented child. Just because like, I feel like when we were really young and joining prep at that age, that was like the thing that gave us value. Like that
Absolutely.
was, you know what I mean? You were extremely valued on this thing that you were a gifted child. And then it kind of always seemed like the beauty was like secondary.
Absolutely.
Or like something that came after. Like I'm still kind of like realizing, oh, I'm kind of beautiful. Like I'm kind of nice. Like I'm kind of pretty. And I guess I want to know, like, did you kind of have the same realizations, or like, is that like how you felt?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The whole time I was just agreeing with you because you summed it up perfectly. I feel like that came as a result of being in spaces where I'm going to say I, but I think it probably is like we were not the standard of beauty. And so it was just a matter of, okay, well, what makes me important in this space? What can make me valuable in this space? Okay, I'm not the prettiest girl here, but I'm smart. Like, okay, I'm not, the one that's turning heads, but I get good grades. Like, I'm doing well in school. Like,
Yeah.
that's where I can get my value in a space that doesn't necessarily see me as beautiful, in a space where most people are, having certain either romantic experiences or just getting by, having certain privileges because they're viewed as desirable. So I definitely, for much of my, if not all of my middle and high school experience, relied on that thinking to make it through. And once I got to college, it got a little bit better because, more Black people on campus. It wasn't, the percentage didn't change, but there were just more people. Instead of being in a class of 60 people, which was what my high school was, I was now like, in a class of over 1,000. So, but that absolutely was the thinking. And it's still been an adjustment, honestly, even now in my late 20s, to be like, oh, people see me as pretty. Like, people see me as beautiful. I never thought I was ugly, but I just was used to having to validate or, I was used to having to validate my own beauty instead of relying on other people. And so now that I'm older, I'm just like, oh, like, now some people think I'm pretty. Like, now, like, beauty is a thing that other people see in me. And it's definitely still something I'm adjusting to because of all the time that I spent in middle and high school feeling like it wasn't there.
Yeah, feeling invisible. Like, I feel like I've always had to kind of lead with like my intelligence, even professional, like entering big tech. Like, I feel like that was like the number one thing until like I was like, oh wait, I am beautiful. Like, is it crazy to you that like you are kind of like the standard of beauty for a lot of people now? Like, is that like mind blowing to you?
Very much so mind blowing. Like, very much so mind blowing. And don't get me wrong, like, there are days where I'll look in the mirror and be like, okay, like, you look good. Like, you look really good. But again, it's kind of weird when like people on the street are complimenting you and like, people are giving you things for free or people are just nice to you. I'm kind of just like, there's confusion sometimes because there's still that disconnect in my mind of like, what I see in the mirror is what I saw in the mirror. But the fact that you're seeing something too, like, that's interesting to me.
That's bizarre. I feel like you feel like sometimes you're treated like a unicorn.
I think when people come to know more about me, yes. So when they see me, it's like, okay, beautiful. But then if they come to know some of, the educational pedigree or just hear me speak, that's when they're like, oh, this is, at least in their eyes, right? This is not just anybody. Like, this is not just your average person. And they're either intrigued or excited or curious. So it's very interesting interacting with people with just the context of who I am and the background that I have and how they perceive me.
How do you feel about the term beauty and brains?
Yeah. Funny enough, I think it's kind of similar to, I remember years ago, I made a post on Instagram because for so long, and I guess like to other people, like I had kind of branded myself as like the girl who can do both. Like, I care deeply about education. I'm intelligent, hardworking,
Was
but
was that intentional or like it just happened to be like that?
I think it was partially intentional because I wanted to set myself apart in the like influencer content creator space. So specifically on TikTok, I remember I was like, I can't just come on here and talk about makeup. Like, so many people are talking about makeup. They're going to be like, why should we listen to this girl doing her eyeshadow, like telling us how to do our eyeshadow? Like, why should we care? And so I was like, I'm going to lead with law school. I'm going to lead with the educational part of things because that's something that people might, raise an eyebrow to and say, oh, interesting. I'll still show the products in the video, but I'm going to lead with being in school and being a law student. And so in that regard, as a strategy, it was intentional. But I remember a few years back, I made a post that I still agree with because I feel like I had branded myself as like, oh, the girl who can do both. Like, I remember, there's always that saying like, oh, get you a girl who can do both, get you a girl who can do both. And I was like, honestly, like, it's really all about the desires of like men when you're like saying this whole get you somebody who can do both. Like, it's like, oh, like creating this well-balanced, like well-rounded person for somebody else. Like who is doing the getting of the girl who can do both.
Yeah.
It's not like, I'm not getting other girls who can do both. Like, it's like guys. So I thought about it and I was just like, if you want to do one thing, I remember in that caption, I was like, if you want to do one thing and do one thing really well, like good for you. If you want to do all the things, do it. But sometimes it can be a little frustrating to have to like mold yourself into being the person who can do everything and who can be well-rounded, because it really is just like still this kind of male gaze that's telling you like, you're not good enough if you can just do one thing. And like, you know, we want someone who can do all of the things. We want someone who can look good and cook and speak well in a room of investors or whatever the people have you. So I feel pretty similarly about beauty and brains, because it's kind of just like you're by calling those two things to the forefront, you're almost inherently saying that it's not normal to be both at the same time, or that there's something, like noteworthy or special about being beautiful and being smart at the same time.
I feel like it makes it seem like it's a rare occurrence. Right. There's not plentiful of like beautiful and incredibly smart women. Right. Like there's not an overabundance.
If anything, that's the norm, I feel like.
Yeah, no, literally. And so like it's so crazy because like the first time I actually started being critical of that like saying, because you know, like I feel like during grad season is where that phrase seems to pop out the most. And it's like beauty and brains. And they're like, okay. And like I just so happened to see it right after like on my feed, like I had saw like a male podcast. And so I was just like, and they were saying something misogynistic, and I was like, all right. And then I scrolled and I saw like 3 or 4 grad pictures, and it was like beauty and brains. And I was just like, why are we acting like this is so rare? And we're like the fact that you can be beautiful and be smart as fuck, like is not something that like literally we have met over and over and over again, especially amongst Black women.
I was just about to say, I'm like, if we're talking in the context of schooling, like Black women are edgy. Like, so the definition of beauty and brains involves like getting degrees. Like we already know that that's like all we do.
Exactly. So I was just like, why are we? And also it's like the fact that like also I guess women have bought into this phrase. It was like, oh, like why are we not critical of this? So that was like 2 years ago, the first time I started. And then I kind of just like went down a Google hole. And then that's when I actually found the article, tons of articles actually of like women being extremely critical of the phrase. But I guess for me, specifically for dark-skinned women, I feel like for the longest, because we've had to lead with intelligence and we've had to lead with like our mind, because we've been told like you're not it, you're not cute, like whatever, you're invisible in that sense. I found myself towards the end of college kind of like, once I guess I realized this glow up, kind of like overcompensating for it at times. And that's why sometimes I feel like I can empathize with girls who do maybe have bought into this idea of beauty and brains and it being like this empowering phase. Because you had similar experiences, how you dealt with that, this realizing, oh, I am beautiful, but like it not saying that let it get to your head, because it's not a let get to your head type thing. It is like a weird imbalance. Like you went from one side of the spectrum to the other side of the spectrum. So that must be like not traumatizing, but like
jarring.
Yeah. It makes you question like, is it because I'm beating my face and like laying my edges and like what is it that's now has all these people like super interested in? Obviously you're aging and like things like that, like you know, you glow up and stuff like that, but it's like was that jarring at any point?
Yeah, it definitely, I would say, was a journey, because I feel like, yes, I hear what you're saying when you say like the word is not get to your head, but like getting attention from people in new ways can definitely be a different type of experience. And so I feel like college for me was that like, it was that time period where like, if I wasn't careful, I was definitely not like getting high off of validation from like other people, particularly men. Because that was, well, also for context, I went to an all girls school. So besides the fact that I literally was not going to school with guys, I also, you know, went to college and then all of a sudden had this like glow up in some, that was like the phase 1 glow up, I would say. And so it was definitely like, looking back, I'm like, yeah, you definitely were like getting high off of the supply of like this external validation from people. Like it didn't have to be that serious sometimes. Like this person didn't really do much for you, but you were just wanting to hear that people thought you were beautiful. You were just wanting to hear that people thought you were cute. And then it was like, all right, on to the next one. Like somebody else tell me I'm beautiful. Like somebody else tell me that they like me or something like that. So that was definitely the time period where, because it was so new to me, I definitely struggled with not letting the external validation like take precedent over my own understanding of what my beauty was.
You know what's crazy? So I had this glow up or realization, like what you were experiencing, when I studied abroad in Ghana, which is, I
Mm.
think, honestly, like, it's the worst place for that to happen. Because you just attract, like, all sorts of nonsense and filth. And and I, looking back at that experience, I actually just had I spent the day with one of my friends who I studied abroad with yesterday, and she was just like, why were we talking to those people? Like, why were we doing all those things? So I was like 19 at the time, and I just remember being like, oh no, like I'm the baddest bitch, like.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was almost like all consuming. And then when I went back to Ghana 2 years ago, I was like 24, yeah, 2 years ago, and I was like going to the same clubs I was going to, same bars. And I was just like, this is not the type of validation that I would ever accept today. Or that this is not the type of like behavior, or like, I don't know, like someone coming up to me in the club. Like that is not, it's not the type of man that I would ever talk to today. I don't know, hearing you say that was just kind of like an awakening for me. Cause like that is when it, I feel like, specifically happened for me.
I can't lie, y'all. I'm the kind of person who is always playing games with my life. I do not check the weather app before I leave my apartment, and I will be packing the night before a trip. That's just the truth. But finding the right doctor should not be something you play games with. So I had to get serious about my alopecia areata. That's why I went straight to ZocDoc at the first sight of a bald spot, and I found my dermatologist. Guys, I was not playing any games. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors, choose the right one for your needs, and click to instantly book an appointment. We're talking about in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers across every specialty, from mental health to dental health, eye care to skincare, and much more. You can filter for doctors who take your insurance, who are located nearby, who are a good fit for any medical need you may have, and who are highly rated by verified patients. You can also see their actual appointment openings. Choose a time that works for you and click instantly to book a visit. Plus, ZocDoc appointments happen fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking. You can even score same-day appointments, because that's what happened to me, y'all. Literally, I saw the bald spot and I ran to the doctor. I use ZocDoc and you should too. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/honorterms to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/honorterms. One more time, y'all. ZocDoc.com/honorterms. See you there.
But I kind of want to go back to prep and education. And I want to kind of, because I know your background very well just because of prep and everything, but probably not the audience. And I want to know, like, how has your like educational and academic background kind of impacted your perception of like perfection, or you wanting to like strive for perfection? Not even just being compartmentalized just into education, but like spewing into like other parts of your life. Because I do think like you can't really compartmentalize like a few characteristics. Like it just kind of like bleeds all over.
Yeah. So I feel like prep really almost started it all in that regard, or just prep was the beginning of being in exceptionally rigorous academic environments. Funny enough, I wanted to be there. The context was, for me, like I, from a young age, had the goal of going to Harvard. So, which honestly, that probably was the beginning of some sort of, perfectionist tendencies that I didn't even realize. I one day like heard on TV, like as like a 5-year-old or something, that like Harvard was the best school. And I was like, well, then I want to go there. Mm-hmm. So in some regard, it was innate. Like in some regard, it was just like, for some reason, like little old me was just like, if they say it's the best school, like I want to go there. And the reason I wanted to go to prep was because there was like a clear pipeline of, people before had done it. And me, I'm just like, put me in the path of people who've done it before. I don't really want to be a trailblazer in this regard. Like, show me so that I know that the odds, like if people have done it before, the odds are in my favor. Like, I should probably be there because I don't want to make something out of nothing. But prep was tough because you take all of these kids who are gifted and talented, who've been told, that they are exceptional. You passed the interview, you've taken an IQ test, which, funny enough, the other day I was thinking about that and wondering if prep still does IQ tests, because like that just seems like, it seems very just, it's an overwhelming concept to think about the fact that I sat through an IQ test to get into this program. And
at like 9 years old or 10 years
truly.
old. Like, that's crazy. Every time I tell people that, they're like, an IQ test?
When was the last time you've heard of people taking IQ tests?
It's like racist.
No, it is.
It's really proven to be racist now.
No,
Yeah.
that's why I'm very curious. I'm very curious as to whether they still do IQ testing, but that's besides the point. So you're like, you're thinking you're hot. You're like, they tell you like, oh, you of thousands of kids in New York City, you've made it. And then you're like given the hardest work you've ever had in your life. But that doesn't change the fact that like you're here because you think you're really gifted. You are really gifted and talented and all of those things. But it's almost like you can never be good enough. But I feel like when you're in that environment, you feel as if you constantly have to strive to be good enough, right? Like the way prep does public honor rolls, like that was how it was for me. Like you stand up and they call people up and are like, this person has honor roll, like this person is, and I was like constantly like, I didn't make honor roll until my second summer. And so by that point I had commenced and I was like, I never got to stand up there and like be the girl that was like on honor roll. And so I think that lent itself to just this like constant like seeking that like attention, or not even attention, but just constantly feeling as if you had to be on a level where, where you were satisfied. So whether it was with grades or whether it was with the school that you were going to, right? Like when everyone finds out what school they're getting into. So that I feel like it just naturally spills over into everything else, because it's not like academics is the only thing you're doing. You get to your school and now there's the layer of sports and extracurriculars and being on, student council or the newspaper or the yearbook and all of those things. And so now instead of it just being school, now you have to be good at all of those things. It definitely was a journey. And I feel like prep did a little something.
So, given our academic educational background, what would you say is your relationship to being perfect?
I don't necessarily feel like I have to be perfect myself, like me, the person, but I definitely still think that there are some perfectionist tendencies that I have when it comes to certain things. So the things that I care about, I really care about. And in that way, I'm like, I really need this to be perfect. So I'm thinking about like when I host friends, which it's enjoyable for me. Like when I host friends, I have like a whole like setup. I'll do like when I have friends over for Galentine's or Christmas or something like that. Like I'll do basically what looks like a whole set design, like on my kitchen island. And when I'm planning that, that's where I see like my perfectionist tendencies come to play. Like I'm like, the colors have to be exactly the same, like color palette, like it has to match, like this has to be from this particular bakery or whatever. I don't treat everything like that. And I think as a full-time content creator, like I have learned to scale back on my perfectionist tendencies, because if you do have them, you're like, social media values output and like a high output in terms of just consistency, especially with TikTok. So like if I'm trying to be perfect, if I'm trying to deliver a feature film, like I'm not going to be able to meet what the algorithm is looking for. And it's not meant for that. So, I don't, now that I think about it, I'm like, I don't feel like I have to be perfect in any way, but there are certain things that I still see perfectionist tendencies come out for. But sometimes I think that's a sign that I really care about something, but it's also about striking that healthy balance.
I know it's been over a year now since you left your law firm. I know in your bio, I saw on your TikTok, you was like, I used to do law, now I do whatever I want, which is like, it's giving carefree.
Yeah.
It's giving like, fuck the perfection.
Yeah.
I feel like most of your brand on TikTok is like the balancing act, being able to do it all and do it great and perfect. And it's like, it was kind of like the first time, at least for me, I was seeing you be like, yeah, no, I can't do it all.
Yeah.
So how was that?
It was an experience. I feel like that was the first time in life that it was like, I realized I'm still processing. I actually recently got back into therapy, which is crazy because like last year I wasn't in therapy when it all happened, because like I was very much on like, oh no, I'm good. Like the deals are still coming out. I'm fine.
Yeah.
And now I'm just like, okay, like let's process what happened, because that was a lot. Because so much of my life I had built a sense of identity around academics, around what, like, being a working professional or working towards a professional degree. And then within a matter of days, not really a matter of days, within an instant, but then it took me like days to actually leave my job. Within an instant, all of that changed. And it made me realize how attached I was to a particular image.
Yeah.
Because even though I was fine, right? Like, even though I
think you made a video, right? You were
Yeah.
like, guys, I'm fine. Like, I'm
I was
great.
like, I can afford to leave this job.
Yeah.
So I'm not out here like, really struggling. I'm doing fine. And that's when you realize, okay, well, what was your perception of success? Because like maybe I would say like, oh, success is like making above a certain amount. And I had that, right? To an extent, like if I was making above a certain amount, but I still wasn't really satisfied. And it's not like I wasn't satisfied in I missed the work that I was doing at this job, because I didn't. And I don't think I found the work interesting at all. I never wanted to be a corporate girly at all. But there was still like, something feels off here. And it wasn't the something feels off like I'm missing a sense of purpose, but something feels off like I don't feel like I have the thing that other people would like think makes me important, or the thing that other people would say like, oh yeah, like we can hear, we want to listen to you, right? Like, I still struggle with that idea of like,
it was like the pedigree thing, like this was, it gave you the pedigree
Yeah.
that you felt like you needed to maybe like thrive on social.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like when I in college studied government and sociology, I would have loved to just study sociology. And ultimately, I think if I had more time, I would have gotten there. But telling people that you are a sociology major, in my head, didn't like, it wasn't going to lead to the same. It wasn't giving. It wasn't giving to people. And not just in my head, like in reality, you meet someone and say like, oh, I'm, studying sociology at Harvard. Okay, interesting choice. Oh, I'm studying political science and sociology at Harvard. Oh, cool. Like, you want to go into politics? Like, that's when all the questions and all that stuff. So you meet someone and you say, oh, I'm a lawyer. Oh, I'm, in law school and an influencer. Oh, cool. Tell me more about law. What type of law do you practice? Oh, I'm an influencer. Interesting. What do you do? Like, what? Like, especially on a generational level, you meet someone older and you're like, I'm an influencer. And even in some ways, like telling people or like leaning into the whole like entrepreneur thing, I feel like it's still trying to attach like some sense of legitimacy. If I say content creator, if I say influencer, you're not going to think of me as legitimate unless I say entrepreneur, unless I attach entrepreneur to it. So it definitely is an adjustment that I feel like takes some real unpacking, like hence therapy, hence having a life coach, hence like just doing a lot of thinking about how much of who I thought I based on a job or based on school.
Yeah. And another thing I also realized that you said earlier, you were like, when I was young and I wanted to go to Harvard, there was like a certain path that I knew I needed to follow. And it's interesting that you chose law, because that is one of the most traditional, like, there is a certain path to partner and like what that will become. And you also kind of, I don't know if there's like a part of you that kind of enjoyed that path and like, okay, I got to work up. And I guess it's interesting because now influencer, this is a new field. This is a new profession that we are seeing. And I guess, how do you feel kind of being in a career path where like there is no path anymore?
Yeah.
You don't really know what you can make of. We still don't really know what people can make of this and how far it can go and what are also like the long-term effects of this and so on and so forth. So it's like, how are you kind of like grappling with that on top of also being in your 20s and not knowing what the fuck you want to do?
It can be overwhelming at times. And part of it being overwhelming is because I'm also fully aware that there's no path and I have to like carve that out. And listen, that's not me. Like, leaving my job was the last thing that I feel like I would expect from me. I'm still glad I did it, but like, I'm very much so like, all right, like, after 2 years we do this and then we move on to this and this is the path. And now I'm in this like very new space or territory. I definitely think I'm up for it though, but it's not something that I would have expected for myself. But the struggle or the reason that it's overwhelming is because while I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing, everyone else like that is in my online community is also asking me what I'm doing. And I'm just like, whoa, like, everyone's like, are you going back into law? Are you going to do this? What are your long-term goals? And I'm like, let me figure that out and then I will get back to you. Like, so I think that's what's overwhelming about it. I think a lot of people have a perception about being an influencer that might be negative. And for that reason, sometimes people might want to like say like, oh, it's not stable, or, oh, what are you going to do after this? And then I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, Well, when you meet like musicians, like sometimes their careers don't last years and years. Like it's actually very rare that someone is going to have a 20 to 30 year career as a musician. Like we have examples of like Usher or Beyonce who have managed to make it work, but there were plenty of one hit wonders in our day. And like, I don't know if anyone would go up to the musician and be like, well, what are you going to do like in 5 years when this doesn't work out? Right. Like, so there's a way that we approach influencers when it's almost like in any other entertainment industry, like, you know, it could be a hit or miss. You could flop in 5 years and you may not. But the way I approach it is I'm just like, I know who I am. Like, I know what I'm capable of. I know like influencing was something that happened by chance, but I also know I'm very capable of making something out of nothing. And so I think the part that makes it overwhelming is everyone wanting an immediate answer from me. And I'm like, I've always been an immediate answer person. And I'm just now being okay with not having an immediate answer and just like observing and figuring out like what feels good right now. Like, what am I excited about? How can I pursue that path instead of saying like, this is the plan, regardless of whether or not I'm enjoying this. This is what I'm going to do because I said I was going to do it and I stick to my word. So I think that adjustment is really important when just trying to navigate being in this uncharted territory space.
That's just life too. Like you make plans and literally God laughs and things change. And it's I always find it funny when people ask for plans because like I still work corporate. Every month or so when I have a one-on-one with my manager, 5-year plan, 10-year plan. And I'm like, will I be alive? Like, do we know? Like I see those comments under your video a lot. And it's like almost as if like, I mean, people always feel entitled over influencers, but I think there's other influencers that don't get those type of questions. Like I feel like it's very specific to you in terms of like having it all sorted. Specifically like as a dark-skinned Black woman, like did you feel that you did to a certain point like have to be strategic in how you created this desirable package pursuing content creation and social media?
Yes. I knew I had to be strategic. I think I went back into that space of leading with the brains first. Because especially on social media, like people are not going to latch onto dark-skinned women doing the same thing that their lighter skin or white counterparts can do and get millions of views for and get millions of followers for. And so, but I also at the same time wanted to create a space for other women, other Black women, other dark-skinned Black women who felt like they weren't necessarily being catered to by other content creators as well. I think a lot of Black women, and I was aware of this, like can relate to like, you know, wanting to be in school or wanting to study hard as the path to, you know, mobility or all of those other things. I'm fully aware of that. And I feel like I felt like sometimes there was not that space to speak to the girl who's like, I really want to do well in school and like, not everyone thinks it's cool or not everyone thinks it's a thing that you should spend your time on. So it was double-sided. It was like, okay, like I'm aware that I'm a dark-skinned woman and like the algorithm is stacked against me, but also at the same time, I'm willing to accept that because I want to cater to people who don't feel like they're being prioritized in people's audiences.
I mean, one thing I noticed in the, like, just when I analyze influencers in general, like, I feel like a lot of dark-skinned women, and including you, like, I feel like you guys kind of fit into this, like, clean girl aspirational bucket where, like, a lot of times your white counterparts, like, they're allowed to be a hot mess. Like, they're allowed to be disgusting and, like, put it on camera and, like, people are like, yes, like, that's so real, that's so raw. And, like, if we show up with our hair not done or like, you know, just if there's like a hair out of place, it's like, that's like, you should really fix your hair.
Yeah,
like you should
try
actually,
this.
like try this. Like there's these stylists in your area in Brooklyn. Like they'll literally like send you like the people. And when I was building this podcast, it's funny because I was like, guys, like I really don't want to do like the clean girl aesthetic. Like I really want to separate myself from that. But obviously, here we are. Here we are. Like, do you think it's possible for dark-skinned women to, at some point, be like our white and lighter-skinned counterparts where they can be a hot mess and someone can see it? Like, similar to how, you know, you had the Black girl who's like, I'm actually just smart. There are Black women who don't always have it together. Is there enough people wanting that content that it's worth making it?
No, there aren't enough people wanting that content. There simply are not. I think it's always interesting because I feel like on social media, there is that conversation of like, everyone is like, you know, living that luxury lifestyle or like everyone's aspirational. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, when was the last time you saw someone? Because sometimes TikTok will throw, a little 0 like video on your For You page. And you're just like, what is this doing here? And it's like, well, did you engage? Like, were you curious? Did you go and seek out that person's page and see what they're doing? And I feel like people aren't fully being honest with themselves that they're not seeking out that content. So the algorithm is definitely playing a role, but I think people want to see something that they can aspire to, something that they can envy. And to the extent that, someone is just like the hot mess, I fear it goes into the space where they become the crux and they become the person that like, oh, at least my life is not as bad as this person, or at least, I'm not, they're doing way worse off than me. Like, I would never do that. Like, I would never, I feel like you see it sometimes when people like share their like dating stories and like how like they might, get a divorce or end up being with someone that it turned out to be really bad. I'm thinking about a popular YouTuber, TikToker, Arnell, like when she shared her story about being a single mother, which is a very common situation where the person that you had a baby with is not the person that you thought they were. And maybe, she made some mistakes or might have done something differently, but her story is not really like that is the run of the mill story. Yeah. And people were just like going in and we're just like, I would never, like, that's crazy. Da, 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 da. And so that's how people who share their like honest real life, I don't like have anything special going on, this is the reality, that's how they get treated often. And so people aren't seeking it out, but if they do find it, if they do come across it, those people get put down and shamed. Yeah. And then so if you're on the side of the person who's sharing that, you have to be really strong. Like you have to be like, I know it's going to come with a lot of hate. And that's not fair because again, white counterparts are not getting the same amount of hate, or if they are, it's being met with the same amount of praise.
I feel like I've seen that in real time, and not just like her too. Like I feel like also there was the whole drama between like Vanita and like Kane in terms of like what is like real, like, you know what I mean? Like you can have your feelings about whatever situations are going on, but like I feel like the way people do engage, and like I kind of feel like sometimes the Black women get jumped on TikTok. Like,
absolutely,
like, they get jumped.
If you make a mistake, like it's over for you.
No, it's not like commentary like I feel like everybody else gets. It's like you are full on being attacked. And sometimes I'm like, I don't even really know like how you can kind of keep going after some of the videos I'm doing. But like, do you feel sometimes like you're trapped into making perfect content? Because like I feel like you must know that you are kind of pedestalized as like this perfect Black woman. Like you wake up at 5 a.m., you go to the gym, and like I tune in. Like I wake up and I'm like, wow, Eni went to the gym today. That's amazing. I'm like, I wish that could be me. But like I'm gonna wake up, barely eat breakfast, and like go to the office. And like that's the reality. But like do you feel like there's room for you to maybe like stray away from the perfect content? Or do you even characterize that you're someone who like kind of creates perfect Black girl content?
Yeah, I think I might have strayed away. I feel like when I initially started on TikTok, I was doing a lot of like voiceovers that were like kind of vulnerable in that way. And sometimes it can be hard because it's like, okay, like it might have been vulnerable. Like I'm talking about like, I don't really like what I'm doing, or like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, or like, those sorts of things. But I guess that what you said, like being put on a pedestal almost to some people negates that. It's tricky because I think for me in particular, oftentimes like sharing the less perfect content probably involves other people. Like it probably involves like my experiences with other people or things that are sensitive to me. And my like one rule as an influencer, not one, but like the top one is like, I don't post about what I don't invite commentary on. So like a lot of people maybe have the perception that like, oh, I grew up with money or whatever. And I'm like, nah, we were just talking, like I grew up in Left Rack City. I grew up in the hood, like nothing special. I didn't have my own bed or room until college. Like definitely did not grow up with money, but it's like, I'm not about to put all of my family's like information and like setup out there, So it's tough because a lot of the things that might reveal the less perfect sides of ourselves, or at least myself, would probably involve like probably involve other people in that
Yeah.
context. And so that's what makes it a little bit challenging. So in that regard, I'm like, yeah, I'm not about to tell you like how I grew up, because like I'm telling like what my entire family went through. And I'm like, I don't need you talking about my family. They didn't sign up for that. I'm not going to necessarily tell you about some of the like less fun dating experiences that I've had, because like, I don't really, because people will figure out who the ex-boyfriend was. And that's not the point, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's absolutely not the point. Same thing with friendships, when like, you know, friendship breakups and things like that. I'm like, yeah, people are going to figure out who I'm talking about, or that person is going to figure it out. And so that's what I think makes it a little bit challenging, because I have those boundaries that make it such that I'm not always running to share like the messy parts of life.
All you're putting out is kind of like the good, or like the appealing, or the you know, everything that's like pedicured and look nice.
Yeah.
Do you feel like your content kind of puts pressure on the girls that look up to you to feel like they have to be perfect, like they have to wake
Dang,
up
I
at 5
never thought
a.m.,
about that question.
like they have to do all that you, I don't know, just like everything, because like you, like I said, like you wake up at 5 a.m., you beat your face, you look great, like you, not a hair out of place. And sometimes, I remember I was talking to Cahleb about this. I want to bring him into this. But I was just like, sometimes I wish I could just wake up at 5 a.m. and like go to the gym. And Cahleb was the one who was like, girl, this just like won't be you. Like you're just not a morning person. And like, I think that's fine. Like, I think you can go to the gym at 6 and like you will live. Like, and I was like, no, but like, I want to have it all together. Like I remember saying this, 'cause I was like, I just feel like the girls who have it together, like they wake up in the morning and they go to the gym, and I just need to get my life together. And me getting my life together meant that like I was going to force my body to wake up at this time when I know I have a bad habit of staying up late. And it wasn't until I listened to Cahleb, and Cahleb was like, that just won't be you, and I think that's okay. And he was just like, I look at Eni's content, I tune in because wow, she's beautiful, and like she really wakes up at 5, but like that will never be me, and like that's okay. And I'm gonna go to the gym at like 12 noon. And so I guess, do you realize your content kind of puts that pressure out on people?
Yeah, no, I didn't really realize it. I think oftentimes when people, it could be because oftentimes I'm like answering the same question. So that 5 a.m. example, like I have contextualized, like it's because I'm a drop everything at 10 p.m. and go to sleep person. And on the days that I don't go to sleep by 10, like when I got my hair braided, I think I actually posted it the other day. I was at the shop until midnight. So there was no way I was waking up at 5 in the morning, like to be very clear. But I haven't necessarily thought about it that way. And that is something to definitely think about, because that is a good point. Like that is, I can definitely imagine that or see that. And oftentimes I think on the receiving end of it, I view it as like flattery, like, oh my gosh, girl, like, you know, like I wish I could or whatever. And I'm viewing it from the lens of like, oh, they're just like flattering me, like, oh, you go girl, like do it. But really hidden in underneath that, there's a level of like, no, I actually really want to be like you. And like, I actually really want to do what you do. So that's something that's very real. I think what I will say, the place where I talk or used to talk, I need to go back to it a lot more openly was my blog. And that was because like blogs don't really get as much traffic. And so I would just post there like it was nothing. And so, yeah, I recently started Substack. I haven't posted anything there, but I'm like, yeah, I want to just share. I feel like writing was the way that I could just share certain things.
That's how it started. It started with Any Given Sunday. And you were writing, right?
Yeah, I was writing. I wrote a blog post about like lessons from heartbreak, or, you know, just I would just write. Like the goal was to write every week, and I did. And sometimes it was like, oh, you know, makeup products that I'm using, but then there was also like experiencing disappointment in law school admissions when that happened. So there's actually a lot on my website that was very vulnerable, and that was because I just felt like people weren't really looking at my blog, and like some people were, I'm sure, and they were, I know they were, because they would reach out to me and say like, wow, that really impacted me. So, and I always like know deep down like writing is something that I really enjoy. So yeah, that's
what
something
made you
to think
actually
about.
I know you started because it was in conjunction with your like Sunday series of posting like your Sunday outfits when you went to church. But I guess like what made you did you start the writing before the Sunday outfits, or did you add it like after posting the outfits? And like what made you, I guess, like go to writing?
Yeah, so it was July 2017. So that was a couple of months after I graduated college. And that was when I did like my first like Sunday style image post. And at the time I only had like friends as followers. So like, I don't even think I had like 5,000 followers. Like it might've been like 2,000, which is like the combination of everyone that I knew high school, college, and like met along the way. And I just started posting, and my friends started to expect it from me. They started to look forward to it. And a friend of mine actually commented like, oh, it's Any Given Sunday. And I was just like, oh, like, that's actually cool. So I started using it as a hashtag, and naturally I'm just the type of person who craves progression. And I was like, all right, so if we do this, like I gave myself a deadline. I was like, we're going to hit the year mark of doing these photos. What are we doing here? Is this going somewhere? How are we moving forward? And I decided to start a blog. I think blogging was still kind of popular. It was trending downward at that time, but I had followed a couple of people who just made it very clear, like, you don't own YouTube, you don't own your Instagram, you don't own your social media platforms. Make a blog on your own website, you own that. So if anything happens, like, you have your own newsletter, you have your own website, all of those things. So I was like, cool, the natural thing to do to make sure I have something of my own is to have a blog, because I can keep posting these Instagram posts, but I feel like having a blog would signify that, like, I am a content creator and I create written pieces. So that was really how I got into it. I set a personal deadline, and blogging was the thing that you as a creator could own on your own.
Got you. And I guess, did you continue? You did say you wrote about heartbreak. You wrote about all these things. Did you kind of go into it with the same strategic mindset that you did with like kind of like the content creating or content creation? Or like, were you kind of more willing to kind of be okay with like being imperfect in the writing?
Yeah,
like
no, it was oftentimes the question that I would ask myself when I was trying to think of content was like, okay, what am I experiencing? So whatever the answer to that question was would be an inspiration for a blog post. So maybe I was experiencing gearing up for travel or had just come back from a trip, but also maybe I was experiencing, feeling weird about moving back home after college and not, getting a job that I thought I wanted to get, or being in public service as opposed to like everyone else who went into some sort of like corporate job. So it really was just like, what do I want to talk about? And again, I was growing at that time. So like, only 5,000 followers, there could not be more than 5,000 people who would ever read my blog post. Like I was getting like maybe 200 views on a post or something like that. And again, it was friends that were just like, curious. So it really was just like my personal diary that I didn't really know or care if other people were really reading.
Yeah. I mean, so you've gone from 5,000 to almost like 500,000 followers on like social media.
Yeah.
How do you give us a lot, even though I know you say that, there are certain things that you keep to yourself because you don't invite commentary, but even without that, you give us a lot. Like, I feel like I know a lot about you just based off what you post on social media and the research that I've done. How do you keep up the consistency when you're not feeling like it, when you are feeling a hot mess and like, or you are like, shit happens, like family things happen. And like, I know for a fact when I was going through family things, like I barely wanted to see my friends rather than like, better yet, like even be able to like pick up a phone and like post.
Yeah.
And so I guess I want to know, like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah. So one, I've gotten a lot better at taking breaks. I feel like a couple of weeks ago, I was just like, yeah, I'm not posting on the stories. I'm not like, I'm just not going to do anything, not going to be present. I think the middle ground sometimes for me when I don't really feel like it is, so it's tough because I actually enjoy it too. Like there are some times where I'm just like I know things, I'm going through some things, but like this was my hobby. Like this was the thing that was the distraction from a lot of things for me. So like it was the thing that got me through law school. It was the thing that was going to make working at a law firm bearable. So sometimes I genuinely just enjoy it so much that I'm like, yeah, I want to post about this product, or yeah, I want to just post the sunrise that I saw this morning on stories. Sometimes the middle ground is having like things where I'm not really shown. Like I think I actually kind of do a decent amount of faceless content too, where it's just like me moving things around or like showing action. And that also sometimes is the middle ground. Like you don't need to see me. You don't need to know necessarily what I'm going through, but I have no problem taking a break. Like that week that I was deciding or like in the process of leaving my job, I was gone from social media. Like I was just like, hey guys, it's been a week. We'll talk later. Like that was it. And I realized oftentimes people don't really like, not to say they don't care, but like they don't care as much as you do. Like it's kind of like when you're worried about people remembering the outfit that you wore, it's like you remember the outfit that you wore because it was your outfit and you wore it. But if you asked me like, what outfit did so-and-so wear to that party we went to 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't be able to tell you unless I like was really a stalker or just really like the outfit. So I think just being in that space where I'm like, girl, like no one's going to be like, Eni, you didn't show up. Like, what's going on? You're not as consistent. I'm just like, I'm the only person who's putting that pressure on myself.
I guess, but how does the pressure change from it going kind of from a hobby and then like monetize content? And like, do you have to sometimes make content for things that you don't want to do? Or like, do you have like one of those rules to yourself that you're like, I only make content about things that I care about or I actually fully endorse?
Yeah, I'm pretty... So yeah, everything that I make content about is something that I care about. I don't necessarily make content about all the things that I care about because I would probably be overwhelmed. But everything that I make content about is something that I care about. So I'm not a big trend person. I really don't. I don't really like the idea of chasing trends because a lot of times it might be unnatural to me. Sometimes it's how people gain a following, but like the most that I incorporate trends into my content is like a trending song that's like the audio just to boost, or to get it up there in the algorithm. But I feel like the type of content I create, I'm very much so like, this is what I want to put out. This is who I am to some extent. And by to some extent, I mean like, I still like, even though I feel like people know me online, like the way that my family knows me or the way that my closest friends know me, like they know me in a different way. I think people sometimes are always like caught off guard, like when they see me like dancing to music or like, singing an Ashake song or like saying something really funny. And I'm just like, no, that's actually me. But like, because my content is so like curated, you don't necessarily see that all the time. But I'm like, that's me, like there's elements of all different parts of me that'll be online sometimes too.
What would you say is like your holistic like self-care routine? Like I know obviously pausing on social media is one of them.
Yeah, I have expensive self-care habits, and it's expensive because it's travel. I've realized that like travel actually is self-care for me. It was funny because I had a life coach like from last 6 months of last year or like last 3 months into, it was a 6-month program. So I started probably around October and went into like around March. And like one of the questions that she asked me one day was like, when do you feel most rested? Like, or like, when do you feel at rest? And like, I was like, all right, I'm going to give a truthful answer. I was like, when I'm on a beach, when I'm by water, when I'm in sunlight, like all of those things. And when we read it, I was mentioning like, oh, I think at the end of February, I'm going to be burnt out. Like I just looking at my schedule for the month, I know I'm going to be burnt out. She was like, when do you feel rested? I mentioned all those things. She was like, so you need a vacation. Like you should plan to do a vacation. And it was the best thing. I did a solo trip to Aruba and I was just like, oh, I didn't realize like I could just like do that because like I'm going to need it at some point. So travel honestly is really restorative for me, but it is expensive. And I'm obviously grateful to be in a position where I can just like book a restorative like retreat for myself.
Yeah.
Going on walks. I love walking. Through the pandemic, through COVID, like my walks were so important to me. Through studying for the bar exam, like the only time I would have the moment to leave was going on walks. So that is really important. And it's probably going on walks because that's the time I listen to music. For some reason, I can't really listen to music at home because usually I'm working or like there's something, but like going on a walk is when I'll like listen to music and just like tune out the world. So those two things are big. Being around friends and family. Like I love hanging out with my friends. I love seeing my family. I love like laughing with them. So that in a way is self-care. It can be restorative. It can be draining sometimes, but it can be very restorative in that way. And eating good food and cooking, I like it too. And putting my phone down.
Period.
Yeah, do not disturb. That is my best friend.
Would you say you're high maintenance?
Yeah, probably. I'm not even gonna lie. Like, probably, but not really. Like, it really depends on how you look at it. Like, my nails are growing out. I can't fit in an appointment before I leave for travel soon. I'm just like, my nails are just gonna be grown out. Like, I don't really care. Like, I don't do lash extensions or anything. Not to say that it's like my beauty routines are very kind of minimal.
You're also like a do-it-yourself girl, I
Yeah.
think, right?
Yeah, certain things I'm just like, let me just do it myself. Like I'm just like, I'm not gonna stress myself out over like having certain routines booked again and again. I mean, appointments booked again and again. But yeah, I mean, like I have expensive taste. Like there's certain things that I like. So, but I would say like, is it high maintenance? If I can maintain it, like I'm maintaining it with ease. So I think, you know, it's not really high maintenance for me. So it depends who wants to know.
Actually, period.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's actually true. I guess what's high maintenance to me, and I mean, or high maintenance to you may not be high maintenance to me.
Yeah.
And if I have the budget to do it and keep it
Yeah.
up, so it's my problem.
Yeah.
My situation. Now I want to talk about dating.
Ooh.
I don't want to get, obviously, it won't be too crazy, I promise.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
But I know you like sparingly like give us like little nuggets here and there. Like,
Yeah.
you'll be like, get ready with me as we go on a date. And then
Yeah.
everyone's in comments like, who is it?
Yeah,
Who
yeah.
is it? And you're like, we'll tell you.
Yeah.
And so I guess I want to know, like, obviously we talked a lot today about like perfection and like the pressure of it. And people love love. People love
They
relationships.
do.
They love content about people falling in love. Hence why the Love Island franchise is ever growing.
Yep.
And will continue to grow, specifically after this season. Do you feel that pressure? I know, you're a beautiful woman, end of your 20s. Do you feel a certain level of pressure in the dating space in your life and also like sharing it?
Yeah, I don't necessarily feel a pressure to get married. I'm not gonna lie. Like for some reason, I still feel like a child.
All of us.
Yeah. And I'm like, it could be because I was in school until 27. So all of my life until 27, I was in school in some capacity. So it didn't feel like I had to start doing adult things or making adult decisions until then. And even then, I'm just like, I'm still kind of just, coasting along in a way. So in that regard, I still feel like a child. I feel like the classic case of growing up in a household where you couldn't date until some time period. And so I don't think I felt like not comfortable. Like, I don't think it was until law school because I was living at home when I was from 22 to 24. And I don't know, like, I think, sure, I was going on dates and I could have gone on more dates or whatever, but I still don't think that was a time period where maybe like my mom was putting pressure on me or saw that for me. Like, it was still very clear that I was going to law school. And so in that regard, it kind of was like, you're not necessarily done yet. So like boys are a distraction in that way.
Yeah.
So I don't think I started like actually dating until 24 when I started law school. And so in that regard, I'm kind of just like, how are we going to get this pressure if, maybe for people who might have been dating since like 15, 16, 17, like that type of thing. But I'm just like, I'm new to this. Like, I'm still learning about myself in relation to a man romantically. So in that regard, I don't feel pressure. I don't think I feel pressure from an audience or a community either, because what I show them is what I show them. I'm like, I have no interest in being anyone's relationship goals at all.
You mentioned that you started dating like 24-ish. And what were your like early dating experiences like? Because like for me, I started dating when I was in high school. So I had like one brain cell and then he had one brain cell. And so 2 brain cells together, it was just a mess.
Yeah.
It was just giving toxic. And there's always a part of me that's like, I kind of waited until like I had a full brain. And you basically did. You basically waited.
I did.
And so it's like, what were the pros for you to kind of like wait until you were kind of a bit more mature, had a bit more of like an understanding of like what you would want in a relationship?
Yeah, the pros. It's hard to pinpoint the pros. I'm trying to think. No, truly. It's not like I wish I started dating younger, because I don't. And I don't even think I would have really. Up until 18, I was so hyper laser focused on going to Harvard for college. So like, I don't even think I would have entertained boys, even if I was like allowed to. But I still felt young when I first started dating. Like, so this is technically a con. I still felt like, because it was my first, like being in my first relationship at 24, that it still very much so felt like a first. So I felt like I was easygoing in a way that I don't think I appreciate. Like, you know, go with the flow. Like, I'm just happy to be here because like someone finally wants to be in a relationship with me, and like, you know, let's do all of the lovey-dovey type of stuff that like I really might have wanted to do at like 20, 22 or something like that. So that was a con, because I feel like you, in the way that like maybe as a child or as a teenager, you might still be like easier to manipulate, or like less, the word is not fussy, but less critical of the situation that you were in. I think I was a lot less critical.
So you feel like it was just kind of delayed, like what people usually went through in high school. Maybe you felt like you were going through it at 24.
Yeah. And like, in looking back in retrospect, having been out of it, I think the pro though is that like maybe there was an added level of seriousness. Like, I feel like dating in high school, like, you don't have money, like there's not like something going on. But dating, like, you know, in law school or dating older, it's like, okay, like we can do things, we can have an enjoyable experience, we can have real conversations. I guess it really just all depends on what the goal is. And I think sometimes we overlook the value of like getting to know yourself in relation to, I'm not saying like, you know, just go out and do everything, but I'm starting to realize now, as I'm 29 now, and I'm just like, there's still a lot of things that I'm learning about myself, like in relation to a romantic partner. I don't think I need all the experience in the world, but I think it is helpful to have just like some, like just like on a date, like pay attention to what that experience is like, to what the dynamic feels like, to how it feels to you. So I think that is important. I still don't think I would have done it at like, you know, 17 or 18.
Yeah.
But I do think like I might have been of the mindset before, like, oh, I can be one and done, or like, oh, first relationship can be my only one, or like, oh, I don't need to date everybody to know. And I'm just like, there is some value in like going on the date and meeting people and just like getting to know people, because you can learn about yourself.
Yeah. I saw a TikTok where you did this calculator. And you calculated the amount of US men meeting your standards, which turned out to be a whopping 0.031%.
Yeah.
And I have to ask, like, what were the standards that you put into the calculator?
I don't think it was much. I think it was single.
What?
So unmarried. No kids. That no kids will take a lot of people out. And I think that's what might put pressure on a lot of people my age, because it's like the older you get, the less likely you are to find people who do not have kids. Because like, again, I said I feel like a child, but like if I had a kid, like right now, it would not be a teenage pregnancy. Like it's not a crazy idea for me to have a kid at 29. And that's what's like crazy. So yeah, if you told me a man that was 29 or 30 had a kid like that, it would be like, this is not a teenage pregnancy. So no kids, unmarried. I think education was like above college degree, not above college degree, like college degree at least. Height. Oh, that's what cut a lot of people out. 6 feet, above 6 feet was what I was looking for. I think those were the main things. But yeah, single, no kids. Oh, and I think I might have put in black. Yeah, so that probably.
Have your standards changed?
No, they haven't. And
So you're still striving. Are you still striving for black love, you would say?
I am. I would say I almost diversified the pool, because again, like in this whole beauty standard thing, my big shock of this summer, like in terms of like beauty standards, has been being aware of the fact that white men might be attracted to me. And I'm saying that now with confusion, because I'm still confused, because again, going back to youth, being in predominantly white spaces, I was not the apple of white men's eye. So like, I'm kind of just like, oh yeah, they're not interested, they're not attracted, like whatever. And I'm now in this space where I'm just like, oh, like I'm being approached by white men, or like I'm, you know, and I considered opening up the pool, because I'm like, okay, here I still am, like, you know, what's going on. But then this summer I've had honestly fine dating experiences with black men that have met a lot of the criteria that, you know, I just mentioned. And so for that reason, I was just like, well, if I'm finding what I like have been looking for, there's no need for me to open up the pool just yet. But I still very much so would like, you know, to end up with a black man.
What would you say is your current type?
Ooh. Tall. Black. Current type.
What about the short kings though?
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. There's a lot to unpack because I feel bad. Like I do feel bad because genuinely speaking, there's nothing they can do like to change that.
Nothing. There's a surgery apparently.
No, and that it sounds horrific. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like whenever I actually hear people go through it, I'm just like, oh, I'm so sorry that we made you feel like you had to do this. Like, you know, but you know, yeah. So it's very unfortunate. But I don't know. I'm a tall girl. I have 3 brothers who are above 6 feet, like fully. So I'm kind of just like, this is what I've grown up around. This is what I know. I think there is a lot there to unpack about like masculinity and like feeling like because I'm like very educated and very like go-getter and very ambitious that like, you know, to then also like feel like, oh, I'm like also bigger than my person. Like there's a lot to unpack there. But it has something to do with like, you know, and I'm saying this like, not like it's a good thing. I'm like, for better or for worse, there's something involved about like the height, like being attached to masculinity and like me wanting to feel a certain way in relation to a man, especially given the fact that like I have all of these other things that might more so be attributed, especially as a Black woman, that like more might be attributed to being more masculine, if that's what we want to call it, like being educated and being, you know, headstrong and being very intelligent and ambitious and all of those things. So
yeah.
But I'm also just very attracted to tall men because like, I don't know, once upon a time I wanted to be a like basketball players, very toxic time period in life. But yeah. I mean, here's
we've all
the thing.
gone through it, so
It's not like I haven't dated people who were below 6 feet. I definitely have. Like my first relationship, that person was like maybe 5'10" So I'm not like, oh, like, you know, write it off. You probably just have to be like really attractive to me. And yeah, so I'm not like closed off to it, but shorter than me without heels on, I probably wouldn't do.
yeah.
Unless, I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, like, so we know your standards for like obviously the guys that you date, but I guess for you, like, do you put yourself, you know, in the same breath of all the perfection that we've been speaking about? Do you feel like this pressure to be like package perfect to the person that you're dating, or like,
No.
or like, I don't know. I mean, I guess that would feed into quote unquote pick me culture, and I don't really want to venture there today, but like, I found myself when I was like, kind of, because I started dating, I want to say, well, I had my first boyfriend when I was in high school. And then I would say like when I came to college and I went to NYU, and dating in the city was so different. It was like night and day from boarding school. But I would say at the very beginning, I felt a need to package myself in a certain way, like this desirability package or whatever. And it's like now that my big brain is developed, I'm like, actually like, fuck niggas, like fuck men. Like why would I ever put on why would I put on a show for you?
Yeah.
Not to say that I don't want to show up as my best person, you know what I mean? Like who I am, authentically to who I am. But I am now more so less obsessed with like the nitty gritty of like showing up perfect or like just whatever.
Yeah.
And I guess I want to know like what you think about that.
Yeah, I think I might have been at that place too. Like I feel like a lot of people go through the like, oh, like I want to have makeup on when he FaceTimes me, or like, oh, like I want him to see me like look a certain way. And as I've come to realize that like a lot of people don't necessarily care, but also like it's not realistic. Like I'm just like, you know, I think what helps is being a content creator, because if they see my content online, it's kind of like, you'll see me without makeup. Like you'll see like all of the parts of me that like aren't necessarily always curated. But no, I don't necessarily feel like I have to, and maybe I don't feel that way because maybe I already kind of think that I am like a good package that they're getting. So maybe I don't feel like there's anything else I need to do, because I'm like very much aware, like on paper, like when you list certain things out about me, like as a guy, like, I don't have to do anything to package myself in that way. It just like is what it is. But I will say it's not like a pressure, as I'm like, now that I'm like older and dating, I do feel a pressure to like get my act together, like in certain ways, because I'm like, oh, like this dating
Your
thing,
act
like,
together?
yeah, like, which is crazy. Like, you know, no, but what I mean by that is like, this stuff is very serious sometimes. Like when I'm having conversations with men who are like a tad bit more serious. And so I'm like, oh, like things like finances, things like, you know, what you do or like how you just like live your life, things like, you know, like your, I don't know, maybe like spirituality, like certain things that you're like, oh, when you like are like with someone, it's no longer just about like the lovey-dovey, hold my hand, like where are we getting dinner? It's like, how do you think you want to raise kids? Like, how do you, like, what's your family like, right? Like, what's going on there? What family might I be like joining? I'm still very single, but I'm realizing that the tone of the conversations that I'm having now, because I'm approaching it with a serious mindset, are a little bit more serious. And I'm just like, oh, like, let me just make sure that, like, you know how the girlies are like, oh, like, let me, you know, get it together, like, so that when the time comes, I'm prepared. I'm like, oh, like, let me make sure that, like, everything is in order, because, like, this is serious stuff, and it's not just, like, for show or for pictures on Instagram.
I feel like as dark-skinned Black women, we're constantly freeing ourselves from desirability prison. And honestly, we're doing this shit on our own terms. And I'm so proud of us, because it is work and it is hard. What is some advice that you have for Black women who are watching this?
Yeah, I love that. Love giving advice. I would say ask yourself what you are afraid of when trying to figure out, like, when you're in the process of trying to figure, like, free yourself from this space that we're kept in. What are you afraid of? And then what would you do if you were not afraid? And that is the action that you should take. That's honestly the best advice for me. Like, what is the thing, like, when you're making a decision, or when you're, you know, trying to free yourself from the idea of what perfection is, or what makes you desirable, or what makes you valuable, pause, because a lot of that has been put on us, and we've adapted some other person or institution's idea of desirability. What are you afraid of? It's usually about what other people would think, or what other people would do, or something like that. And then in a world where those fears did not exist, or where they weren't a factor, what would you do? And that's pretty much always led me to a space where I'm like, this is what I want to be doing. And this is where I feel most free and most at peace with myself and my decisions.
There was one TikTok I actually read, and I really identified with it, because anybody who went to PWIs kind of knows this feeling of, like, always kind of wanting to show people, like, you didn't believe in me, or you thought you was gonna, and it's like, and I'm an Aries, and I always say this, like, I dream of vengeance. Like, I'm gonna get my link back. I'm gonna show you. How would you kind of separate yourself from that feeling, and kind of not using negative forces to kind of fuel your, like, ambitions, or like, you know, this idea of being perfect and freeing yourself from that? How do you kind of separate yourself from that feeling?
Yeah, I love this question, because I haven't told anyone this, but I'm actually supposed to be working on writing a book. And the book is supposed to literally, like, I need to actually do it. Like, I actually need to, like, sit down and do it. Like, but it quite literally is supposed to be about, like, rethinking ambition. And a lot of that, the way that we've thought about it, or had to think about it, was success as revenge. And it is tough. There are a lot of things, right? Like, you have to remind yourself that oftentimes, like, these people aren't even thinking about you, like, or you don't have contact with them, right? Like, they don't know where you are. You don't know where they are. And so oftentimes it's really about how they made you feel, and, like, you trying to one up, or you trying to, like, quell or silence that feeling, right? Like, this person made me feel less than, so I'm now going to go to all of the things that society says makes me better than, or makes me more than, and that's now what I'm gonna, like, you know, say is my success. So it's tough and it's challenging, and I'm not gonna say it's invalid. It's not invalid. Like, when people make you feel like you cannot do something, like, the natural result is to feel like, no, I'm going to show you that I can do something. But it takes a lot of learning. And sometimes it takes you being unhappy with the result of you getting that revenge, or with the result of that success that you got only as a form of revenge. So it takes experience. It takes coming to a realization that people often don't really think about you. Like, I hate to say it, but sometimes that teacher who told you wouldn't amount to something, like, still doesn't care about the fact that you amounted to something. And so it's really on you. It's unfortunate, but you're not going to get the, like, oh, wow, I was wrong, like, from a teacher. Oh, wow, like, you really did do something well, or you really did amount to something. It can make for a good story if that's what you're into, but oftentimes you unfortunately have to do the work of, like, letting go of whatever expectations other people had for you, and setting expectations based on what you know you're capable of, as opposed to what other people think you are not capable of.
And also sometimes it becomes like an endless chase, because it's like, that teacher, that student, that girl,
My parent,
that boy, my parent. Yeah, exactly. And you like constantly are like, there's like 100 people who can do you wrong in a day. So it's like if you're constantly chasing that feeling of like, yeah, I showed them, it kind of gets exhausting at times, as I've seen like for myself. It's like, okay, yeah, I proved them wrong. On to the next thing. It's like, all right, like sometimes it gets to a point where you got to do this shit for yourself because you want to, and like you deserve this shit. Everything that you work hard for, like it's gonna yield good results.
Yeah, I always like to say, like, sometimes I'll have like these moments that like could probably qualify as like hits blunt moment or whatever, where you're just like, like what is happening? And for me, that's like my phrase is like life is happening. Like, so like I don't know how else to better say it. Life is happening. Like each day that passes by, this is life. Like this is the life we are living. Quite like I'm living life right now. This is the life that I'm living. And if I spend my days concerned about what other people are thinking of me or what other people expect of me or don't expect from me, like that is such a not fun way to live the life that is currently underway. Like I don't get to go back and like redo certain things. This is I'm almost 30 and it doesn't feel like I'm almost 30, but I'm like, I always say, I'm like, I can't spend my life just going from going through a season of or series of just waited outs. I can't spend my life going through a season of just prove them wrong and then on to the next one and then prove the other person wrong. Because I'm just like, then my whole life is a series of what other people were like being concerned with other people. And I really want to live a life that I love.
Very, very true. You got to do shit on your terms.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming. And actually, before we go, what perfume are you wearing?
Yeah.
You smell amazing. Like the entire set literally smells of your perfume.
Thank you. I'm wearing 2 fragrances. One is Peach's Revenge by the House of Sarah Baker. And then the other is Cassili by Parfum de Marly. So they're both 2 very peach forward fragrances. Peaches are in season, so I wanted to, give what the fruits in the grocery stores are giving. I wanted to give a little snack, a little snack, a little peach cobbler, a little peaches and cream.
Love it. Love it. I was thinking it from the moment you hugged me. I was like, I have to ask what she was wearing. And on that note, guys, if you like what you saw, please follow us at On Our Terms Pod, and you can follow Eni at
Any Given Sunday.
You know where to find me, you Tomsy. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.